Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiv Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Tirye Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. So continuing with the discussion on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita by Satsvarup Das Goswami, Volume 3, Only He Could Lead Them, San Francisco, India, 1967. Chapter 22nd, Swami Invites the Hippies. So in San Francisco, all the hippies, from different areas, coming to have lunch every day at Radhakrishna Temple, and sometimes they would attend lectures, sometimes they would attend kirtan, give hard time to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada very patiently, he just tolerated them and tried to preach to them. Prabhupada was sitting on his dais, lecturing to a full house, when a fat girl who had been sitting on the window seat suddenly stood up and began hollering at him. "Are you just going to sit there?" she yelled. "What are you going to do now? Come on. Aren't you going to say something? What are you going to do? Who are you?" Her action was so sudden and her speech so violent that no one in the temple responded. Unangered, Prabhupada sat very quietly. He appeared hurt. Only the devotee sitting closest to him heard him say softly, as if to himself, "It is the darkest of darkness." Another night, while Prabhupada was lecturing, a boy came up and sat on a dais beside him. The boy faced out towards the audience and interrupted Prabhupada. "I would like to say something now." Prabhupada politely said, "Wait until after the class, then we have questions." The boy waited for a few minutes, still sitting on the dais, and Prabhupada continued to lecture. But again the boy interrupted. "I got something to say. I want to say what I have to say now." The devotees in the audience looked up, astonished, thinking that Swamiji would handle the matter and not wanting to cause a disturbance. None of them did anything. They simply sat while the boy began talking incoherently. Then Prabhupada picked up his kartals. "All right, let us have kirtan." The boy sat in the same place throughout the kirtan, looking crazily, sometimes menacingly at Prabhupada. After half an hour, the kirtan stopped. Prabhupada cut an apple into small pieces, as was his custom. He then placed a paring knife and a piece of apple in his right hand and held his hand out to the boy. The boy looked at Prabhupada, then down at the apple and knife. The room became silent. Prabhupada sat motionless, smiling slightly at the boy. After a long, tense moment, the boy reached out. A sigh rose from the audience as the boy chose the piece of apple from Prabhupada's open hand. Haridas, I used to watch how how Swamiji would handle things. It wasn't easy. To me, it was a real test of his powers and understanding how to handle these people, not to alienate or antagonize or stir them up to create more trouble. He would turn their energy so that before they knew it, they were calm. But when you pat a baby and it stops crying, Swamiji had a way of doing that with words, with the intonation of his voice, with his patience to let them carry on for a certain period of time. Let them work it out, act it out even. I guess he realized that the devotees just couldn't say, "Listen, when you come to the temple, you can't behave this way." It was a delicate situation there. Often someone would say, "I'm God." They would get an insight or hallucination from the drugs. They would try to steal the spotlight. They wanted to be heard, and you could feel an anger against the Swami from people like that. Sometimes they would speak inspired and poetic for a while, but they couldn't sustain it, and their speech would become gibberish. And the Swami was not one to simply pacify people. He wasn't going to coddle them. He would say, "What do you mean? If you are God, then you have to be all-knowing. You have to have the attributes of God. Are you omniscient and omnipotent?" He would then name all the characteristics that one would have to be an avatar, to be God. He would rationally prove the person wrong. He had superior knowledge, and he would rationally explain to them, if you are God, can you do this? Do you have this power? Sometimes people would take it as a challenge and would try to have a verbal battle with the Swami. The audience's attention would then swing to the disturbing individual, the person who was grabbing the spotlight. Sometimes it was very difficult. I used to sit there and wonder, how is he going to handle this guy? This one is really a problem. But Swamiji was hard to defeat. Even if he couldn't convince the person, he convinced other people in the crowd so that the energy of the room would change and would tend to quiet the person. Swamiji would win the audience by showing them this person didn't know what he was talking about, and the person would feel the vibrations of the room change, that the audience was no longer listening or believing his smile, and so the person would shut up. So Swamiji would remove the audience rather than the person. He would do it without crushing the person. He would do it by superior intelligence, but also with a lot of compassion. When I saw him do these things, then I realized he was a great teacher and a great human being. He had the sensitivity not to injure a person physically or emotionally, so that when the person sat down and shut up, he wouldn't be doing it in defeat or anger. He wouldn't be hurt. He would just be outwitted by the Swami. Even while translating in the privacy of his room, Srila Prabhupada was interrupted by disturbances. Once police cars and ambulance sirens screaming, light flashing, converged beneath his window after the Hell's Angels had started a fight in the digger's store in the next building. On another occasion, about 1:30 a.m., while Prabhupada was dictating teachings of Lord Chaitanya, a girl repeatedly knocked and called at Prabhupada's door. At first, he ignored the interruption. Since his arrival in San Francisco, he had completed many pages for this important book. Lord Chaitanya's discussions with Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, Ramananda, and others explored many Krishna-conscious topics mentioned only briefly in Bhagavad Gita. In the West, almost no one knew about these teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Now Srila Prabhupada intended to compile his teachings in one volume, providing the most complete presentation of Bhakti Yoga ever introduced in English. Such a book would give great substance to the Krishna consciousness movement, but now his solitary concentration was being interrupted by a knocking at his door and a woman's voice calling. Getting up from his desk, Prabhupada went to the front room, but did not open the door. Who's there? A young woman answered, I want to speak to you. Come back later in the morning, Prabhupada told her. He knew that in San Francisco, just as in New York, he would not always be able to write peacefully. Preaching in America meant having to tolerate just this, a crazy call in the middle of the night, tearing one away from ecstatic concentrations on the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. The lost souls of Hyatt Ashbury, with the illusions of knowledge, their cries for help, their arrogant challenges, pulled his attention away from his mission of translating and commenting on the scriptures. Now alone in his apartment, speaking through the locked door, Prabhupada told his intruder that he had work to do, and that she should go away. He promised he would see her later that day. He was ready to speak with the hippies all day, but the early morning hours were the special time for his literary work. Preaching face to the conditioned souls was important. He had come there to preach. But he had picked these early hours to speak intimately to the whole world through his books, without disturbance. The girl, however, continued pounding and calling until Prabhupada finally opened the door. There, standing in the hallway, he saw a teenage hippie with a glassy stare and deranged appearance. He asked her what she wanted. She remained tensely silent. Speak, he told her. She stepped into his room. He saw her helpless, a victim in the ocean of Maya, and he asked her repeatedly what she wanted. Finally, the girl stared at him with widened eyes and exclaimed, Look, Mahaula. I don't know what he wanted. Prabhupada decided to awaken Mukunda, who lived down the hall. He stepped barefoot into the hallway. The girl followed, shutting the self-locking door behind her. Now he was locked out of his apartment. She continued to stare at him defiantly in the bare, unfriendly surroundings of a corridor of locked doors at 1 in the morning. This was why the Babajis of Vrindavan stayed in their little cottages chanting the holy name to avoid being bothered by ungodly people. The Babajis, of course, never even dreamed of these bizarre intrusions from the psychedelic San Francisco night. At Mukunda's door, Prabhupada began pounding and calling loudly, Mukunda, Mukunda. Mukunda awoke and opened the door, astonished to see his spiritual master standing barefoot in the hallway, a wild-eyed young girl standing a few feet behind. Yet Prabhupada remained grave and aloof. This girl came to my door, he began. He explained briefly what had happened and what should now be done. He did not appear angry or harassed by the girl, and he indicated that Mukunda should deal kindly with her. Mukunda remembered when Prabhupada had been driven out of his New York Bowery, left loft by his roommate David Allen, who had gone mad on LSD. Then also Prabhupada had remained cool-headed, though caught by a dangerous and awkward circumstance. Mukunda went downstairs and awoke Haigri, who had a key to Prabhupada's apartment. Srila Prabhupada then returned to his room and to his dictation of teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Mukunda saw the girl down to the street and admonished her not to bother an elderly gentleman like the Swami at such an hour. Staring at Mukunda, she said, "You're not ready," and walked away. At 7 o'clock, when Prabhupada came down to the temple for the morning class, the girl was sitting in the audience in a calmer state of mind. She apologized. Later in the day, Prabhupada repeated the story in good humor, recounting how he had several times asked the girl to speak. He opened his eyes wide, imitating her expression, and said, "Look, Maula," and laughed. "We shall go for a walk at 6:30, said Prabhupada one morning. "You can drive me to the park." Several devotees accompanied him to Golden Gate Park's Stowe Lake. They knew the park well and led Srila Prabhupada on a scenic walk around the lake, over a bridge, through forest-enclosed paths, and across a small rivulet, hoping to please him with nature's beauty. As he walked, striding quickly, he would point to a tree or stop to examine a flower. "What's this tree?" he would ask. "What is this flower?" Although his disciples were usually at a loss to answer. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu passed through the forests of Vrindavan, he said all the plants, trees, and creepers were delighted to see him and rejoiced in his presence. The plant life there is like that in the spiritual sky, fully conscious. And these trees, Swamiji, how conscious are they? Oh, the spirit soul is there, Prabhupada said, but the consciousness has been arrested temporarily. Perception is more limited. Whatever Prabhupada saw, he saw through the eyes of scripture, and his comments on the most ordinary things were full of transcendental instruction. As he walked, he reflected aloud, those who want to see God must first have the qualifications to see God. They must be purified, just like the cloud is now covering the sun. They say, oh, the sun is not out. But the sun is there, only your eyes are covered. So it should say, actually, the sun is now out. Like tour guides, the boys led Prabhupada to the more picturesque areas. They came upon swans gliding on the lake. Srimad Bhagavatam. Oh boy, again I got kicked out. So they came upon swans gliding on the lake. Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada said, compares devotees to swans and literature about Lord Krishna to beautiful clear lakes. The non-devotees, he said, were like crows attracted by the rubbish of mundane topics. Walking over a gravel path, he stopped and drew their attention. Look at the pebbles. As many pebbles there are that many universes And in each universe, there are innumerable living entities. The devotee is delighted in bringing Swamiji to a rhododendron glen, its big bushes completely covered with white and pink flowers. And they felt privileged to see Krishna through Swamiji's eyes. The next morning, when Prabhupada again wanted to go to the park, more devotees accompanied him. They had heard from the others how Swamiji had displayed a different mood while walking. Again, the boys were ready to lead him along new trails around the lake. But without announcing a change in plans, he walked up and down the macadam road beside the lake. Prabhupada and his followers came upon a flock of sleeping ducks. Awakened by the sound of people walking on the path, the ducks began quacking, moving their wings and walking away. When a few devotees hurried ahead to shoo the ducks from Prabhupada's path, duck began making sounds of grouching and grumbling. "Move, you ducks," one devotee said, "you're disturbing Swamiji." Prabhupada said quietly, "As we are thinking they're disturbing us, they are thinking we are disturbing them." I mean, so much compassion for even ducks. Prabhupada stopped beneath a large tree and pointed to some bird droppings on the ground. "What does this mean?" he asked, turning to a new boy who stood beside him. Prabhupada's face was serious. The boy blushed. "I don't know what it means." Prabhupada remained thoughtful, waiting for an explanation. The devotees gathered around him, looking intently down at the bird's droppings. The boy thought the Swami might be expecting him to decipher some hidden meaning in the pattern of the droppings, the way people read the future in tea leaves. He felt he should say something. "It's excreta, the defecations of birds." Prabhupada smiled and turned towards the others for an answer. They were silent. "It means," said Prabhupada, "that these birds," he pronounced the word bards, "these bards have lived in the same tree for more than 2 weeks." He laughed. "Even the birds are attached to their apartments." So if they're passing their stool, mean they're living on that tree for more than 2 weeks. As they passed the shuffleboard courts and old men playing checkers, Prabhupada stopped and turned to the boys. "Just see," he said, "old people in this country do not know what to do, so they play like children, wasting their last days, which should be meant for developing Krishna consciousness. Their children are grown and gone away, so this is a natural time for spiritual cultivation. But no, they get some cat or dog, and instead of serving God, they serve dog. It is most unfortunate, but they will not listen. Their ways are set. Therefore, we are speaking to the youth who are searching." Yeah, it is true. It's very difficult to change the conditions of old people. It's easier to preach to young people. When Prabhupada and the boys passed a sloping green lawn just off Kesar Drive, the boys pointed out that this was a famous hippie hill. In the early morning, the gently sloping hill and the big quiet meadow surrounded by eucalyptus and oaks were silent and still. But in a few hours, hundreds of hippies would gather here to lounge on the grass, meet friends, and get high. Prabhupada advised the boys to come here and hold kirtans. So at least those hippies can hear the holy name and make some progress. So thus ends chapter 22nd, we start chapter 23rd, the price affair. Swamiji's disciples in New York were surprised to find that they could still carry on in his absence. At first, rising early, going to the storefront, and holding the morning kirtan and class had been difficult. Without Swamiji, everything had seemed empty. But he had taught them what to do, and gradually they realized that they should simply follow what he had shown them, or even imitate, as a child imitates his parents. And it worked. At first, they had been too shy to speak or lead the kirtan, so they had played tapes of Swamiji's kirtans and classes. But when the evenings came and guests attended the temple, the devotees felt compelled to give live classes. Rai Ram, Brahmananda, Satswarup, and Rupanuga took turns giving brief talks and even answering challenging questions from the same Lower East Side audiences that Srila Prabhupada had lion-tamed for 6 months. Things were shaky and lacking without him, yet in a sense he was still present. And the devotees found that everything, the chanting, the cooking, the taking of prasadam, the preaching, could still go on. On January 19, just 3 days after his arrival in San Francisco, Prabhupada had returned back to his New York disciples. They were his spiritual children and were very dear to him. Although far from his homeland, India, he hadn't thought first of writing to anyone there. Since he was a sannyasi, he had no interest in writing to any family members or relatives. And as for writing to his god brothers, there was not much importance in that, since they had repeatedly shown their reluctance to help. But being in a new city among new faces and having met with an initial fanfare of success, Prabhupada had wanted to share the news with those most eager to hear from him. He had also wanted to reassure his disciples, whom after only a few months of training, he was expecting to conduct the Krishna consciousness movement in New York. So only after a few months of training, and that too with their background, it must have been so difficult. But still, this is Prabhupada's potency, the potency of a pure devotee. What he can do. So what he wrote in the letter, my dear Brahmanand, Hayagriv, Kirtanand, Satswarup, Gargmuni, Achyutananda, and Jadavani. Please accept my greetings and blessings of Guru Gaurang Giridhai Gandharvika. You have already got the news of our safe arrival and good reception by the devotees here. Mr. Allen Ginsberg and about 50 or 60 others received us on the airport. And when I arrived in my apartment, there were some press reporters who also took note of my mission. 2, 3 papers like the Examiner and the Chronicles, etc., have already published the report. One of the reports is sent here with, please find. I wish that 1,000 copies of this report may be offset printed at once, and 100 copies of the same may be sent here as soon as possible. I understand that you are feeling my absence. Krishna will give you strength. Physical presence is immaterial. Presence of the transcendental sound received from the spiritual master should be the guidance of life. That will make our spiritual life successful. If you feel very strongly about my absence, you may place my pictures on my sitting places, and this will be a source of inspiration for you. I am very much anxious to hear about the final decision of the House. I wish to open the House by the 1st of March of 1967, and arrangement may be done dexterously in this connection. I have not as yet received the tapes for dictaphone, and I have sent you tapes yesterday. Please offer my blessings to Shriman Neil. Shriman Rai Ram is cooking well and distributing prasadam to the devotees, numbering sometimes 70. It's very encouraging. I think this center will be a very nice branch without delay. Everything is prospective. Hope you are well and awaiting your early reply. This letter may be one of the earliest letters, but Prabhupada managed the whole movement while in later years, traveling all over the world. He managed it through letters only. There were no computers, laptops, emails, smartphones that time. Through letters only, he managed. So many letters he wrote. It's amazing. Just really amazing how he managed. But he did so. Okay, I guess I can stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments? Okay, you all have a safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.